Good morning from Paris. That is a very nice start. Good morning here from the Netherlands then. So welcome everybody to this webinar, Understanding the Energy and Wellbeing Impact of Streaming. That is what we're going to discuss the next 1.5 hours. This will be an interactive webinar, so a lot of time also to discuss with one another and also to discuss next steps. But first of all, I would like to introduce to you today's lineup, the presenters of today. My name is Karen van der Zande, and I am Strategic Advisor Sustainable ICT at TNO. Can you help with the next slide, Matthijs? Yeah, thank you. And then Hans Stocking, the lead scientist, Sustainable ICT at TNO, will do the introduction of today's webinar and the background of the research subject, which we will discuss today. Then Louise Schlindwein is our behavioral scientist. She will share with you the quantitative study she has done in the Netherlands with regard to media usage and possible target behaviors where we can influence the impact of online streaming. That will be the first part of the webinar. We'll have a Q&A after Louise's presentation. Then Ali Reza, so Dani Esat, he's an LCA expert and an environmental scientist. He will share all the quantitative data and the climate production potential of streaming behavior. That's the second part. We'll have a Q&A after that. And then the third part will be done by Matthijs Bodelier. He is also the project lead of this subject, and he will share the possible interventions. What are the possibilities to steer in behavior? Where are the opportunities? And of course, this is a very interesting part also we would like to discuss with all of you. So that's it with regard to the presenters, and that will result in this program of this 1.5 hours. So the welcome, first of all, the practical knowledge. Practical information, of course, during the presentations, as it is like now, please please stay muted. And any questions, remarks, comments, please put them all in the chat. So when we have the Q&A, we have all faces visible again, so we can see everybody and we can discuss. And I will hand over pose the question to the person who has put something in the chat. So that's it with regard to practical information for me. Then the program, we used to start at 11. We did with a short delay of 3 minutes, and then at 11:15, Louisa will start with the knowledge sharing of the media use, Q&A. Then Ali Reza, as I explained, Q&A. Then the last call to action in the intervention landscapes done by Matthijs. Last Q&A, and then of course the next steps. It's really important. But before we start with all the research sharing, I would like to give the word to Hans Stocking, our lead scientist, and he will share a little bit more about the background of this research. Hans. You're muted.
I thought I unmuted. Thank you, Karen. My honor to present this to you today, or to kick off this nice piece of work from my colleagues in a program at TNO. And well, to kick it off, to stream or not to stream, that is the question. And obviously it's always a big debate about like who should do what to improve sustainability. But the sustainability of the ICT landscape, we all know that there's, or I expect most of you to know, but just to repeat, the ICT domain has quite an impact on the environment. Like this is the global warming potential as one of the environmental impacts. There's others like water use or critical raw materials. Not quick, Matthijs, please. But it is substantial. It's like 3.5%, 4%, different numbers are floating around, similar to the aviation industry. So it's significant. And because of this, at TNO, we're already part of you see it in the bottom, the Coalitie Duurzame Digitalisering, when it was set up from the LEAP project a number of years ago. But we also started a broader program within TNO to see what we can contribute to actually solving or helping guide this in the right direction. We call this a multi-headed monster because there's technical efficiency, there's Jevons paradox that most of you will know, like more efficient infrastructure will be used more and thus cause more climate change, cause more impact. And we collected, we made a program where a very multidisciplinary team of engineers, so technical people, behavioral scientists, environmental experts like Ali Reza, policy experts, business or market experts, joined forces to see how we could actually contribute to a more sustainable ICT. Next, please. And obviously, where to start? Research is often use case driven, and we have two use cases to start with. AI, which is still big, and we will not discuss today, but streaming is the other one, and this is from the Sandfine Global Internet Report last year. We all know streaming is a majority of the data on the internet. You see here on fixed lines, it's mostly long-tail video with YouTube, Netflix, and the others. And a little bit of social media also happening, and on mobile, social media, which is included in streaming, is really big. So if this is so big, then what should we do? Next, please. Well, that's where the user behavior experts also come in, because we can't really change or do too much about the technology and their service offerings, because it's all foreign providers. But we can influence like our own behavior, demand side. This is a report by TNO colleagues like Geert Paladis, which basically says it's quite difficult to consume less or different, but it does have a big impact, and we should, even though it's very difficult to help society change their behavior, we should do so, and we should aim to do so. And this is also the reason that we joined Platform Energiebewustzijn, which, as the name says, we should be conscious about our energy use, and Matthijs is the lead of our activity there, to really look into what can we do in that area. Last, please. So in a nutshell, streaming is a major daily activity. Louisa will tell us more about this. What people stream, why they stream, how much they stream, things like that. Who is doing the streaming and who is not, with different groups, etc. And this has a direct impact of use to our energy consumption, like especially televisions. Ali Reza will tell us more about this. Televisions have a major impact, but also if I use my mobile all day, the battery drains. So obviously that has also an impact on my devices. And ultimately, it also influences our well-being. Matthijs will touch upon this more in his last part of this presentation. Social media, we know it causes mental fatigue and all kinds of issues for younger people, but also older people, and it has a huge opportunity cost to do other things. So that's in a nutshell what we will hear today, and I gladly hand back to Karin, I think, to take over.
I think I'm taking over right away. Thank you, Hans, and thank you, Karin, also for the introduction. Let's see.
Louise, sorry to interrupt, but Matthijs, can you check the lobby? Because there are some people who still want to be attending, and they are in the lobby. I got an email.
I think they're all in.
Not in this lobby.
Okay, I will check with them. So, please continue, Louisa. I will.
No worries. Okay, let's see. So, hello everybody. Yes, I'm gonna share our results of the quantitative research we conducted last year on the media use in the Netherlands. And let's see. Oh. Yeah, sorry, taking over there. the slide lead. So first of all, why did we conduct the behavior research? We wanted to gain more knowledge about the current streaming behavior and the motivations and barriers to stream more efficiently. And as Hans already said, that's less and different. And what we did is we conducted 2 different studies in 2024. We did a qualitative research among 15 Dutch households. The results of that study is already published. You can see the reference on the bottom of this slide if you are interested in the results. The research consisted of 3 different parts. First of all, we asked participants to write down in a diary on their daily video streaming behavior. In psychology, this is also used experience sampling. And we also installed some routers in their households that did hourly measurements of their data traffic. And in the end, we conducted interviews on both the diary study as well as the data traffic. We reflected together with the households on their data and what did they think about it. And finally, last year, we conducted a quantitative survey among 2,060 Dutch citizens. That was more the validation of the results of the qualitative research we did. And here we try to understand the psychological foundations of video streaming and the intention to stream less. That study was conducted among a representative sample, so we can say that the results can be generalized over the Dutch population, and it was representative in terms of gender, age, education, and geographical regions. Throughout our research, we defined video streaming quite broadly. It consisted of streaming of content from video streaming platforms like YouTube, content on social media like Instagram, LinkedIn, content via commercial video on demand platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, and also TV programs from a website or dedicated app like NPO. And we also included participating in video calls or conferences like this one or WhatsApp or on Zoom, and also gaming. However, as you can see, they are in a different blue tint because these 2 behaviors we didn't include in our impact calculations. Alireza and Matthijs will talk about later, because in earlier calculations they weren't included, and we wanted to be able to compare it to earlier studies a bit better. But in this quantitative and also in our qualitative research, they were included in the definition of video streaming. So what did we find? And then I'm talking mostly about the quantitative research we've conducted last year. First of all, about the video streaming patterns. We found that most participants, 81%, considered spending between 1 and 4 hours per day on video streaming as normal. So we asked them, what do you think is normal? But then we also asked them what they actually self-reportedly think they spend every day. And in the end, on average, that was a little bit more, 4.5 hours per day, also showing, I think, what a habit and how addictive maybe also video streaming is. On average, participants reported using 4 to 5 different devices for streaming, whereas we found that 44% said the smartphone is the most frequently used device, and 26% said the smart TV was the most is the most frequently use device. We also asked for the reasons for that. For smartphone, convenience and consent, accessibility, ease of use was mentioned the most, and for the TV, mostly the larger screen size was the key advantage being mentioned. What we also found is that participants stream most often when they are home alone or by themselves. And for that, we actually used scenarios we have found in our qualitative research. And we asked them how often or in what kind of setting do you video stream the most. We also asked about alternative activities or activities they do during video streaming. And actually, yes, 65% of the respondents said that they would do different things during streaming. So while they were watching a video, they would also do household chores, for example, waiting or traveling on public transport. I think you can recognize that when going by train, you see everybody on their phone. We also asked about common alternative activities. So instead of video streaming, what would people do? And most of them said walking or biking outside, listening to music or a podcast, and reading. But as you can see on the list on the right, we gave them different kind of activities, and also the household chores, playing sports, playing a game, or doing something creative were also mentioned quite often. Then we looked into differences in generations. We did find differences, younger generations, and we defined them as Gen Z, reported significantly more video streaming than older generations. They use more the smartphones more often. And as you can see on the right, baby boomers and older use smart TVs more often than the other generations. Here you can also see the definition. We made a difference between Gen Z, 13 to 29 years old. Gen X millennials were 30 to 59 years, and baby boomers and older above 60 years. Also, younger generations significantly stream more often when they are home and alone right before bed and to escape stress. They are more influenced by hedonic values, and what we mean by that is that people find it important to have fun, to be entertained. And we found that they are more motivated by digital detox or not being on the screen as often and saving energy to reduce video streaming. And finally, they are more influenced by their peers in psychological terms, by the social norm, more so than the other generations. We also found significant differences in household composition. For that, we made a difference between single households and households with children or without children, so families. And we found that single households report more video streaming than participants living together, with or without children. And we saw that they use smart TVs more often, more so than in households with children. They use smartphones more often, as you can see on the right again. Single households also stream more often when they are home alone and right before bed. They are more influenced by environmental values, meaning that they find it important that we care for the environment. And then finally, we, of course, so these were more the current video streaming patterns we can see in the Dutch population. And now we also looked at the intention to stream less. And in a nutshell, we saw that this intention is quite low, actually. So a few participants, only 20%, intend to reduce their video streaming activities. The strongest intention is for social media use. 39% said here they would like to reduce their video streaming activities. Actually, that is also something we found in our qualitative research. During the interviews, most people said that they would like to scroll less on Instagram, TikTok during activities during the day. While on the other hand, watching TV channels or on-demand platforms are least likely to decrease. Then we looked into, okay, what factors actually influence the intention to stream less? And we found that individuals having weaker intentions to stream less, so they actually don't want to change their behavior, they already stream quite a lot. So their habit is quite in their, they have built up quite a habit of video streaming, and they also have a positive attitude about video streaming, which is quite logical, I think. Individuals having strong intentions to video stream less, they are also more aware of negative impacts of video streaming, and we define those as negative impacts on physical health, financial situations, the environment, social life, and mental health. We also found that they have stronger environmental values, as I said before, finding it very important that we care for the environment. And they have stronger motivations to detox digitally, meaning that they don't want to be on their screens as often. So now that I've shared all these results, and we took a step further, we thought, okay, based on this, what possible target behaviors do we derive at? And what we found are we defined 5 target behaviors. The first is, of course, streaming less, and we see some potential here because people actually video stream more than what they consider normal. So there is an interest in doing less, even though the intention was quite low, but still there's potential. Streaming smaller because people often stream when they're home alone on smart TVs, as we saw at the single households, while having smaller alternatives available. They have 4 to 5 devices they stream with, so there are probably smaller screens. Streaming together is actually something we found more in our qualitative study. There people said that social aspects of streaming are important, but then we found in households with children, most people stream alone and also on their smartphones. So there is some potential here, we think. Streaming efficiently, because from the literature we know that people are open to changes in, for example, their screen brightness. Later on in this presentation, we actually made a difference between those screen settings like screen brightness and efficient home network. You will see in Alireza's presentation. And keeping devices longer, meaning the choice of keeping devices longer, because we know there are already quite some interventions on that, and we think we can add to that and compare to that. So this is the knowledge sharing I wanted to do, and now is the time for Q&A. So please open your mic or your video, and we can discuss.
Yes, thank you very much, Louise, for sharing this valuable research. Time for the Q&A. So I was already, maybe Ben, you were surprised to see such a low number for PC usage. Would you like to open up your mic and share your video? And
maybe, Matthijs, you want to unshare your screen so we just see the people?
You can't see people?
It's very double now for
it's
us.
very double. Okay.
Thank you. Perfect.
Ben, are you there? Oh, I'm grayed out, Ben. Maybe we should check with Ben to make you visible.
Oh.
Let me see. Ben. Ben, are you there?
Otherwise,
Yes.
we can maybe read the question out loud.
But still gray. It's strange. Read the question right out. Yeah, I think the posing. Okay. Karin Voorend, are consumers aware of the possible target behaviors? Louise. It's a question from Karin.
Oh, but we haven't talked about Ben's question yet, right?
Yeah, but Ben was just because I can't get everybody to post their own question. But Ben's remark was surprising to see such a low number for PC usage. If video conferencing is included, as many of us do, at least 4 hours a day there.
Yeah, right. But in comparison to the others, to the other devices, it's used a lot less. So yeah, good remark, indeed. But in comparison to the other devices, smartphones and TVs, it's just useless, we found.
And another
For streaming.
question from
For streaming, indeed, yeah.
and Ben's question is, why did you separate PC and laptop?
Because there's also different streamings happening on laptops and PCs. So laptops is more used for work, and PCs are often used more for gaming.
It also helps us in the calculations later on because there's different energy profiles for the devices. So it helps us to calculate the right footprint for streaming on different types of devices.
Okay. And a question from Karin Voorend. Are consumers aware of the possible target behaviors?
The possible target behaviors I presented at the very end were more a step towards the interventions we want to do, and also they come back in Anneresa's and Matthijs's part of the presentation. So no, they're not per se aware of it. They also we saw that there's quite a low awareness in the environmental impact, for example, of video streaming. So this is just a step for us towards interventions.
Yeah. But as we will also cover
so you have a
later,
mission.
there's also some people that already do try to change their behavior themselves already. So there's some people that do try.
Okay. Any more questions? Oh, yes. Daisy Haidari. Are user device energy consumption and emissions part of emissions of streaming platform?
As you will also see in the next section, we consider it part of the entire value chain. So it's from the moment that something is stored on the server and transported, let's say, to the home where there is a router, but also then the end user device. It's all part of the value chain as we use it for these impact calculations.
That's maybe a good bridge towards Alireza. Oh no, I see another question coming in. There seems to be a hidden agenda here that we must reduce the number of hours streaming. The effort is on the users rather than the video providers. True. We were mostly looking at the behaviors, but this was the focus of our research, that we looked into what consumers can actually do to to stream less.
But platforms don't are not excluded from responsibility in that sense.
No,
They can
definitely
also
not.
help to encourage that behavior. So
Yes.
And to add to that, recently TikTok was in the news being fined by the European Union based on the Digital Service Act that they can't have this doom scrolling or this manipulative user interface to make people stream more. So there's a shared responsibility, but it's at different levels. So the EU and the government needs to mind the platforms, and obviously platforms have a responsibility themselves, but we have a responsibility for our own behavior.
And then there's a question from Raymond, beautiful name. Did participants express interest in physical media to lower streaming? Recently, there seems to be a resurgence in it.
We didn't hear anything about that in our research. Also, in the interviews, Matthijs, I don't remember that
we had
was...
a few examples,
Was it?
but it's not something that we asked in the survey on a larger scale.
No.
But
Yeah.
in our pre-study, we did find some examples of people who, for example, went for a newspaper subscription, so they would read the news less on their smartphone, as an example. So there's indeed, it's a good observation that in very specific cases, people are actually preferring physical media.
Okay, are there any more questions? Otherwise, we will just move on to Alireza to see the quantitative side of this research, because we have more than enough space later on to discuss any other Q&A. So let's move on, Alireza.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you, Louisa.
Matthijs, will you open the presentation or? Yeah, I am it. Okay, great. Can I have my pointer? Or yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Louisa, for the knowledge sharing on the media use in Netherlands, and also thank you, audience, for very nice questions. In this part of the presentation, I am going to talk about the climate impact reduction. Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to talk about the climate impact reduction potential of the data streaming behavior from the environmental impacts perspective. Yeah. Firstly, I would like to talk about the introduction and also introduce the research goal of this part of the presentation. We wanted to quantify the environmental footprints of the video streaming in the Netherlands. And also, I wanted to identify the different hotspots of the value chain of this sector. And then when we have this information, we can estimate the different suitable mitigation strategies to reduce these impacts. We use the life cycle assessment as a part of our work, and we consider the different inputs, both energy and material usage. As you can see in the image, we have the extraction of the material for making different devices like the TV or phone, and also all of these devices consume energy, not only by the end user devices, but also about data centers, network, and also at the end, as an output, we have a waste and emission to air, water, and also the soil across the value chain. So let's look at the system boundary of this sector. Well, we start with the content production, and then when the content is ready, we should say on the content delivery sector, which consists of the data center, and we deliver this information by the network to the end users. Here is a place that I'm mentioning. It's a content consumption where we watch different videos. And here we have the choose. We can select the different devices, different network types. And at the end, we have an end of the life of this product. In this research, we just look at these two steps, two middle steps, which are the content delivery and content consumption. For the content delivery, we look at the data centers, energy usage, plus the material usage for the building, for the cooling system, server, storage, and all of the hardware which are there. And also we look at the network in the content delivery. We cover both fixed and mobile network. And also another stage of the value chain is about the content consumption, where we have the end user devices like the TV, desktop, laptop, and also home network equipment, which are also important, like the router, modem, and Wi-Fi port repeaters. It's good to mention that at this stage, we excluded the second-hand and refurbished market and devices. And before studying, we need to make some assumptions. At this slide, I talk a little about our assumptions. We have electricity mix, meaning that it's a combination of different energy sources like the oil, natural gas, and many others, and turning this to the electricity. And when we use this electricity, they can also contribute to greenhouse emission or other impacts. We have a different stage that I introduced earlier. For some of them, like the end user devices, we consider them inside of the Netherlands, because we use them like playback devices inside of the country. But some of them, like a data center and core network, we didn't have enough information where are they exactly located. Like we don't know where are the Amazon Prime's data centers. So we made an assumption and considered that half of them located in Netherlands and half of them inside of the EU. And we considered two different electricity mix. We have two different categories of the devices: playback devices powered by the cable, and another group is the playback devices that are powered by the battery. Like the TV is for the cable, and a smartphone is a representative of the battery-powered devices. And we should say that for the cable-powered devices, we usually have the fixed lifespan, and we change them like every X years, like every 10 years for the TVs. But for the battery-powered devices, it depends on the cycle of the battery. When we use more or more intensely of our devices, we use a more cycle of the battery, and we need to change them earlier. This is another assumption that we made. And let's look at from the embodied impacts perspective. For the playback devices powered by the cable, we can say that they are not directly impacted by the more or less consumption, but for the battery-powered devices, they are impacted by the more or less usage. And another things that I should mention is that for the network part, for energy usage of the network part, we only apply our interventions on the load-dependent part, meaning that we have already all of the network and all of the equipment related to network always on, or they are already there and consume energy, whether we use them or not. So we just look at the marginal part, that when we use more or less, the energy usage of this part is increase or decrease. And these are all of the assumptions that we did, and many others also. Let's look at the system, how we modeled actually. We started from the impacts resulting from the 1/over of the streaming, that we call it micro level. We use different types of the data, like the material that we use in playback devices or the home network equipment, and the energy usage of different kind of network, like mobile network versus the fixed network, and also energy usage on the devices, some of devices when we are watching. For instance, we measure the amount of energy that a mobile phone consumes when we Sorry, do you hear me? Okay, great. And I don't have control on the slide. I have that, yeah. And the next part was that we wanted to scale up our one of streaming to country level. We needed some demographic information and data, like the population of the country and also device ownership, the common device size, the device usage, like the people prefer what kind of the device to watch a video. And all of this data coming either from literature and mostly from the survey that conducted by our team. And yeah, the next part was also when we have the country level model, we wanted to see how much of the people really accept or willing to apply different interventions. So in our survey also, we ask people in this matter, but we don't look at this in our today's presentation in detail. As I mentioned, we made an assumption, and as an assumption, we have some uncertainty. We have two different sources of uncertainty. The first is coming from the assumptions that we made, like the viewing time or device lifespan. These are collected throughout the survey, and survey is self-reported, and people might different compared to what they are saying. And also lack of transparency or data on different data center energy usage, network equipment that can contribute again to the uncertainty. Another group that can contribute to our uncertainty is the future changes. IT landscape is changing quite fast. So in the future, you might have the more efficient data center or network, or even the more efficient devices that can be used for a longer time. These two categories together can contribute to the uncertainty, but despite this uncertainty, we needed a proactive approach to not only quantify this emission, but also provide the suitable mitigation strategies. Starting today is better than never. So we accept this uncertainty and starting to calculate the emission of this sector. To deal with uncertainty, we consider the ranges for the critical or significant parameters that can impact or might change in the future, like the device lifetime, the hours of streamed, and data center energy usage to see the range of the changes and determine the uncertainty amount. Let's look at the interesting part of the presentation, which is the result. Here we can see the result, and Lisa introduced the different interventions like the using device for longer time or efficient network. I want to emphasize here that if we combine all of this together, we can save around 0.4 megaton CO2 equivalents by applying these 5 different interventions. If we want to bring a tangible example, it's similar to turning down the thermostat at our homes by 1 degree Celsius. And our result shows that serious potential for reducing the mineral resource also, which is coming from the manufacturing of the devices. And as I mentioned, we have uncertainty. Here we can see in the graph the amount of uncertainty that I mentioned earlier. So we are aware of this. And the scenarios that Louisa introduced are currently in the conservative approach and also limited by the willingness of the consumer, like how much a person or people really accept these changes or to apply these interventions. Let's look at the hotspot of the emission in the more detail. As we can see in this image, the playback devices manufacturing, like the building a phone, TV, are contributing to highest amount of the emission as a first hotspot. And then again, another hotspot is related to the playback devices energy usage, like the amount of energy that TV or our phones or any other devices like PC consume. So we can say that both hotspots are related to the playback devices, and this is a baseline, what's happening now. And if we applied all of the interventions, we can see this amount of the changes. In the coming slides, we look at the share of each intervention for reducing this 0.4 megaton CO2 equivalents. The first intervention is keeping devices for longer time. We wanted to see what will happen if we extend the lifespan of devices by 25%. And as we can see here, 0.155 megaton CO2 equivalents out of this is coming from this impact potential, which is the first and most impactful compared to all of these interventions. The next one is about streaming less. If people reduce the amount of the watching video by 25% annually, we can save 0.152 megaton CO2 equivalents. And also, result shows that around 20% of people accept this or somewhat willing to make this change. And the next one, the third significant is streaming together. It is almost like that we reduce the hours of streaming, and also it can contribute to 0.1 megaton CO2 equivalents out of this 0.4 megaton. The next one is also the smaller screens. Here we moved all of the people watching the video alone on the TV to smaller devices like the tablet and phone. We excluded laptop at this stage because we firstly applied it, but we saw that it can contribute to more emissions. So we can see watching on smaller devices when we are alone, like the tablet and phone, can contribute to mitigation of the CO2 equivalents by 0.04 megatons. And the last one is about the streaming efficiently. For the network part, we wanted to see what will happen if we remove the unnecessary home network equipment like the Wi-Fi extenders and switching off our Wi-Fi when we are not using them, like the night, and turning off them by around 7 hours per day. And we can see the impacts resulting from that is around 0.04 megaton CO2 equivalents out of this total reduction. And as a conclusion, we use the life cycle assessment as our methodology, and we gave the special attention to the battery powered devices to see what will happen if we switch from the cable powered devices to them. And as I mentioned, we have a large amount of uncertainty, but it should not be a stop for our work. We decide to continue and accept this uncertainty to quantify the environmental impacts and also see the potential. And if we combine all of the potentials, we can say around 0.4 megaton CO2 equivalents, as I mentioned, is equal to 1 degree Celsius thermostat at our home. And as we saw, extending the lifetime of the devices is the most impactful solution among our interventions. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm happy to answer your question.
Thank you, Alireza, for this beautiful presentation and a lot of data and knowledge you have shared with all of us. Ben, you already were...
It's working now.
Ben, yes, finally. You can pose your own question now. Yes.
Somebody fixed the tool. Yeah, I just have a high level, it's almost a philosophical question to you, Alireza. As a scientist, as an engineer, we come up, you've said it, others say it even more. The latest BBC study says 92% of the problem comes from user-controlled devices, mainly the TVs, the things, and the home gateway. And so my question to you is, on the one hand, we're looking at something that we can really understand. We put a watt meter behind it. We know exactly how many milliwatts is going in and out. We know exactly how many there are in the field. We know what year they were made. There's all the data is available. And we're comparing that to the rest of the value stream, which is completely opaque. We don't know how many servers there are just in your country in KPN. How many physical servers do they have in their caches for their CDN? How many? This is all, none of this data is public. So when you as a scientist engineer do all this comparison, then you say, yeah, the bulk of the, how confident, I'm not saying it's wrong, that it isn't 92% or 80%. Some people say the variations vary from 50 to 92% that I've seen. There's about 6 or 7 official studies by reputable organizations. But my feeling is we're comparing things that we can't compare as engineers. On the one thing, this is purely attributional guesstimate work of what's going on in the network compared to the devices. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, of course, we have uncertainty on different things because of the reason that I mentioned. And as you mentioned, also, there is a lack of a transparency. We don't know how many servers really exist. But we should start somewhere and estimate and see how much we can save. So this is based on the most available data, and of course we can have a better estimate if we can have a more accurate information. And yeah, was it answer to your question or?
Yeah, I suppose so. That basically that's the best we can do for now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ben, for posing your question and seeing you live. Karin Forens, you also have a question. Can you come into our audience? Karin? Otherwise, I will move on to Cas.
It is already answered. Thank you.
Karin. Okay. Thank you, Karin. Cas Jansma.
Yes, I will turn on my stuff. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So I wanted. So I'm connected to the platform Energiebewustzijn that you introduced that we introduced in the first slide. So we are mostly concerned about behavior and behavioral change. So I was curious about the potential of the willingness of changing behavior that you presented here. It was like, I think at first it was like 20%, and then for the second, I think it was like 16%. Is there anything to say how the potential to willingness actually translates into changing behavior? Because we know that the intention to change behavior and actually changing behavior, there's a very big gap for most behaviors, also concerning other types of sustainability, pro-environmental behavior. How is that the case for digital activities? Because I can imagine it's very difficult to actually translate the willingness into behavioral change because the impact is so invisible for many people.
Is your question for Louise, maybe, or for Adiraisa?
I guess, yeah.
Louisa?
Louisa?
Yes, so your question is, how realistic is actually the change still, behavioral change here, right?
Yeah, I'm mostly curious, is there data or is there any research on what the translation from willingness into actually changing behavior in this field is? Like, is there something to say about that?
No, actually in this field, this is quite new. That's why it's within TNO also an early research project. We're in the front of this field because there's in general also quite little literature on the behaviors, on behavioral change regarding video streaming. So no, unfortunately, we don't have any data. We want to in the end find that out ourselves. But in other fields of behavioral change, we know exactly what you also said before, that the chance of actually the gap is quite big between intentions to change and actually changing behavior, which is also called the behavior or the intention behavior gap in psychology. So indeed, it's quite a challenge, but we are ready to try it.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, Cas.
Thank you, Cas, for your question, and Louise for the answer. Reza, hi, Dari.
Yeah, hey, hello. Can you hear me?
Yep,
Yes, we can
please.
hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Alireza, for a good presentation. My question is that at this study, you guys have been focused more on behavioral change on user side, and it seems that user device emissions and consumption is part of emissions and responsibility of both digital service providers, I can say, streaming platforms, and also the manufacturer of those devices. So, in your opinion and in your view, based on your study, what would be the best role that those two parts can play in terms of bringing those behavioral changes to users?
I am not sure that I understand your question correctly or not, but you want to see the shared responsibility of both service providers and consumer and see what they can take into account to reduce this emission. Is it your question exactly, or paraphrase that?
Yeah, it's exactly because they're responsible. So they're financially benefiting from those user devices and user pattern usage of devices. Streaming platforms, they're making money. Manufacturers of devices, they are also in the business, so they are making money. So they are responsible. To what extent they are ready to take this responsibility and intervene in these user behavioral change that you mean?
They can please continue, Hans. Yeah.
Well, this is a very difficult, it's not the topic of our research, but this is a very difficult topic because on the one hand, companies have to report on their environmental impact and lower it over time. And then the whole point there is there are standards to allocate allocate environmental impact and scope 3 use of product. For example, we now have the rule that a TV, only the first year of use, it's actually allocated to the supplier like Samsung. And after that, it's no longer his or her problem. That's a rule in the policy making. So this is at the government level. If we want to allocate more responsibility to them, we should change the standards to which they report. And this use of product, they should be reporting on the environmental impact of, if I use my TV for Netflix, then Netflix should report on the energy cost of that service usage. But that's a policy thing and not the aim of this research here. The other thing is we had this court case against Shell by Milieudefensie in the Netherlands, exactly on this point. And it's still in appeal where the court basically decided like, hey, what they asked wasn't granted, but they said like, big corporations that really have influence are to be accountable and do have to take action. But that's still in the courts as of today. So before that has any serious consequences, it goes through all the appeals. And then the question is Shell similar to in responsibility to something like Netflix? So it's a hard question with no easy answers.
Thank you, Hans. I don't see any more hands or questions in the chat. So I think we can now continue to the last part, Matthijs.
Yes, thank you, Karen, and also thank you to Louise and Alireza for sharing the knowledge before. It's now my honorable job to combine both sections into a final section of this webinar where we look at what can we actually do with this knowledge. So we now know where there might be possible behaviors to change. We know what could be the impact of that in terms of sustainability. But there's one more aspect, and let me return to the original objective that we set out for ourselves. that is that we want to actually make an impact not only in sustainability but also in well-being. And that is because if you look at the current also policy landscape with other attention for this topic of streaming and also social media use, we see that well-being is a very important, and rightfully so, a very important value here. So when we introduce also a concern or a thought about sustainability, we need to see how these two values also interplay. And that's something that we like to add as well in this total impact that we foresee. And in doing so, we want to highlight both the impact, but also differentiate target groups who can actually execute a new behavior, perform a new behavior to make that impact. And we also explore different strategies, how to address these target groups and move them, which, as we already discussed in the previous Q&A, can be very difficult when it's about behavioral changes. But first, to add to the knowledge that we already presented about sustainability, I just want to do a quick introduction on what are the effects of streaming on well-being. And there's a big asterisk here that I need to address first, which is that this is all based on literature. And that literature, despite what you might have seen in media outlets before, are not very conclusive about what the actual effect is. That doesn't mean that there is no effect. It's just very hard to prove that streaming causes very specific effects on well-being. But nevertheless, we do know that certain effects relate to streaming, and that's what I'll be talking about in this section. So there's mainly three big trends that we see in the literature, or three different effects. Where we see an effect on physical well-being, where mainly sedentary behavior, sitting down a lot, it negatively affects our overall fitness, but through that also our mood, stress, and quality of our sleep. And besides that sitting down, we also see another physical effect, which mainly concerns eyesight, where looking at screens, especially in darker environments or at smaller screens close to the eye, has a negative effect on short-sightedness. Then another relation that probably many of you already expect also because of the media attention that there is for this subject is the effect of social media, one of the streaming types that we consider in our research, on so-called psychosomatic well-being, so both mental well-being but also physical aspects related to that or as a result of that. And here we see actually that there is both positive and negative effects. This is also very important because we do also see studies that prove that both stopping cold turkey, so no streaming at all, and both problematic social media use or excessive streaming, both have a negative effect, but moderation or sufficient use, as we frame it in our approach, is the way to go. But what is also a relation that we see is that problematic social media use, so excessive use, is negatively related with various aspects of both long-term and short-term well-being, with on the long-term effects of depression, more social pressure that is perceived, and also loneliness. And in the short term, we see more volatile, almost mood swings in people because of the various triggers that are present in the interaction with these services. Then a final thing I want to highlight is that these relationships are typically stronger when it's about younger generations. We see that adults are typically a bit more resilient to these effects, but that doesn't exclude them. We also see that for specific groups of also more vulnerable adults, these effects still hold true. And it's also not excluded that in future studies we do find also effects on adults, but younger generations are also more the subject of these studies as concerns are higher around these people. Now, with that in mind, we can start to give an overview of both sustainability and well-being impacts of the 6 target behaviors that we defined earlier. And here we're talking about sustainability impact as in what can we save, so positive sustainability impact, and how can we improve on well-being, so also positive well-being impact. And what's not completely surprising as we also look at other studies is that prolonging a device lifetime, also because of all the embodied emissions related in the manufacturing, is the most important way to save on sustainability. But what's maybe even more surprising is that the other target behaviors of streaming less, but also streaming together, score quite high on sustainability, savings potential, and also, we hypothesize, could have a positive impact on well-being, because streaming less could reduce excessive online media use, and streaming together could battle effects of loneliness or worsen social connectedness. So there's actually an interesting potential there if we look at both these types of impact. And the last one I would like to mention is streaming efficiently. We don't see a very big impact there in terms of sustainability or well-being, but this still might be interesting because the effort required to make this change could almost be automated, so it could be very low. So we also should take into account how much effort or how effective can our strategy be when we go for this target behavior, when we try to make a change. But we also cover that a bit more in detail, this effort required. Now, another aspect of, let's say, the Venn diagram I showed earlier is the target groups. And we already saw from our survey study that there is differences between generations, but also household compositions. And if we combine that, we see that in general, the life phase of people is very determinant of how they stream and also the potential for changing that. And we defined 5 different target groups that you see here along the life phases that have different aspects. And these aspects we then categorize along a behavior change model. It's the COM-B model, and it mainly covers aspects of capacity to change, motivation to change, and the opportunity to change. And the opportunity here is the way that we currently stream and what devices we use. The motivation here is what could be a reason for people to make a change to what they're doing now. Things we covered are improving on sleep quality, reducing stress, being more connected with the family, but also maybe battling loneliness or physical health, depending on, again, the life phase that people are in. And then lastly, we have the capacity. And again, there are differences here between the life phases, where we see, for example, in younger adults that they typically have little time awareness. They have more trouble estimating how long they stream or engage with social media, and that they are more influenced by peers. So these are ways that maybe give some input to what strategy we can use to encourage them to make a change. And at the same side, on the other side, for families, we see that they are more present in school communities, where we could also try to influence them. So if you combine then target behaviors with target groups, we, for example, get that we could try to reduce social media use among young adults for well-being reasons, or we could try to encourage shared viewing with the entire family among families. But then still the question remains, how? How do we do this, especially in a context, as we already discussed in the Q&A, where there is also a big influence on the end users by the platforms that they use? And we saw in our pre-study, speaking to various consumers, that they already try some way to stream less or stream together or different types of behaviors. For example, seeking feedback on their use or setting limits in certain screen time apps, especially also when people have children in parental controls. We even saw people that employed certain device-free areas, not taking the most enticing device like the smartphone into the bedroom. And we also saw, again, I think already mentioned in the discussion, people trying to downgrade the way that they interact with the service to slow down the way that they use. For example, through engaging with physical media or buying other hardware like dumb phones. Does that then mean that we expect that analog is the new digital and we'll be going back to using these very nice old televisions? Probably not. It's very niche, but at the same time, it can be inspiration for intervention strategies. And based on what we found in our studies, but also what we find in literature on behavior change, we see 9 different, let's say, clusters of strategies that we can employ. For example, we can try to inform people about the negative effects or the potential gains of changing their behavior, and also about how they can do it. So campaigns or offering some kind of manual or educational modules could be a way to do that. We can encourage the use of the apps that some people already use for parental control or their own well-being app for limiting maybe the amount of time that they can use certain services. It's also important to think of the habits that people already have and how we can change that. We found that certain moments like changing the TV or changing the living room arrangements can be a good way to target people to change the way that they view. But also people might need more incentives, so policies can be very interesting there. Or interventions that might be more, or strategies that might be more targeted at the hardware, improving product support, as we already see in some policy implementations on an EU level with the right to repair, for example, or creating different markets and offering people the opportunity to buy secondhand instead of new. And lastly, what's of course also a very interesting way to approach this is to actually take away a lot of the responsibility for end users and simply enabling the sustainable choice and automating for sufficiency instead of automating for more use. And that we can again plot in an overview where we see that different interventions can be, of course, interesting in different situations, but they also have their own effort and investment required. So in efforts, then we speak of the actual effort that's required from end consumers to engage with such a strategy, but also for a consortium to make it happen. And in investment, we're talking about the costs that are involved with that, but also the technological development that might be needed, especially in the case of new software or apps or any other thing that might make it easier. And without going into them into too much detail, if we combine those strategies with the earlier mentioned directions that are as examples, we can see that, for example, reducing social media for younger adults for well-being reasons might be done by introducing limits to use or promoting setting limits to use, as we've also found that they have very little time awareness. At the same time, encouraging shared viewing with families could be done by providing group suggestions, making it simply easier for them to come to something to watch together. And I think for many people, it might be recognizable that it can sometimes take for up to hours to really get to something to watch together. So this could be a great time saver. But these are just two examples. And what we would really like to do is now that we've presented you with a lot of options for target groups, but also different strategies and different impacts and target behaviors, to join us in a Mentimeter and indicate from your point of view, from your point in your organization or in the media landscape or wherever you are working, what you think are most worthwhile aspects to pursue. What groups or strategies or behaviors. So please scan the QR code on the screen. If you were already having lunch, then please drop your sandwich and join us here. And then I'll shortly switch to the Mentimeter. Oh, I see already a lot of people joining. It's good. Oh. Just resetting it so everyone can join. Yes, there we go. For anyone who didn't have time to scan the QR code, there's also a code at the top. If you go to menti.com and fill in the code, you can still join.
And I've put the link in the chat.
Ah, great. Right. No, I see already a lot of different interests and professions here. It's very nice to see such a good overview. Right, I'll give it a little bit more time and then we'll go on to the first question. All right. I think there is no response coming in, so let's go to the first question. Oh, one more person joined. And all right, let's talk about what behaviors you would like to encourage. Okay, clear preference for keeping devices longer, that's for sure, and makes sense. It's the most sustainability impact. But there's actually also a good group for efficient home networks, and then there's also streaming less on a good second spot. All right, I think we got almost all responses. So it's a nice overview, which is actually interesting that streaming together here, which had a lower or higher impact potential, is still less favorable according to you all than efficient home networks. Again, maybe because it's easier to do it. So we go to the next question. Who would you like to encourage to make this change? Ooh. Well, it's a neck-and-neck race amongst family adults and seniors, but young adults are definitely up here. All right. Okay. Yeah. So young adults definitely on top here, but still also quite some interest to make a change amongst families, adults, and even also seniors. Then lastly, we presented 9 different strategies. What strategies do you think are effective, or do you think are feasible from your point of view, given also the target groups and behaviors that you would like to change? All right, policy intervention seems to be the most popular so far, but also enabling sustainable choices popped up really early, creating new habits, and then neck and neck, limiting the intensity, but also improving support for products. And then there's also some interest for campaigns for information and facilitating group viewing. All right, I think we've got all the responses. Really nice to see that there is actually quite an even spread amongst very different topics. And it's also really nice that, there's never one way that we should intervene, but also it's always a combination of different interventions that makes things work. So there's definitely not one way that we should act. I think now it's time to start a Q&A about this last section before we go to the closing words.
Thank you, Matthijs, for nicely combining all the research and these different intervention strategies. And I think also a lot of information we also got now from this Mentimeter and from this audience, which also gives nice direction. Anyone who wants to ask something to Matthijs or add something to the intervention strategies or anything else, please raise your hand. I see Ben again. Ben.
So it's me again.
Yeah, it's you again.
Matthijs, in your presentation about the health aspects, we bumped into a health benefit by accident. We were working on energy preservation for the user recommendations, and we came across this simple idea that lowering ambient light could have a really big effect on energy preservation for some kinds of screens. And then a colleague of mine said, hey, but that's really good for eye health too. And I have no medical knowledge or anything like that. I don't know if you guys have thought about that. Is there a pointer to how we can quantify, how we can deepen that? Is it just some little gimmick, okay, it makes you feel better, or does it actually have a long-lasting effect on people's eyesight over many decades of watching screens?
Yeah, so this is a very good question. I think, yes, there's also within literature, there's a lot of talk about so-called synergies between well-being and sustainability. But there is, of course, the question, does it really work does it really work out that way in practice? And are there only synergies where we see that the sustainable choice is also the better choice for well-being? Or is there maybe also areas where we see that the sustainable choice is not so good for well-being? For example, in the case of watching on a smaller screen, that supposedly is worse for your eyes, but it's more efficient when it comes to energy consumption. So at the moment, what we see is that most of the behaviors that we propose, they have this synergy, but in only very few cases, we see that there is a tension between well-being and sustainability. But when it comes to actually quantifying those impacts, this is something that we want to continue when we actually do these interventions and we measure the impact, whether this effect really happens. But based on what we already see in literature in very controlled trials, is that for some of these well-being effects, there could definitely be an impact. But how big that really is, it's very hard to say. And it's very difficult to come to these numbers, but there is definitely a relation that we can prove.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ben, for your question. I think Reza Haidari has a question. Reza? Could you please elaborate more on enabling sustainable choices? Any examples, success stories? That was the question. Matthijs.
Examples of enabling sustainable choices. Well, we know of, for example, we discussed the efficient home network. We know of examples in France, for example, where one of the internet service providers, actually implemented an energy-saving feature in their router, where during, for example, night times, it would go on a standby mode. This is, of course, a very easy way to basically, without any real behavior change of users, enable a more sufficient way of using. So that's just one example that comes to mind. But I'm very sure that there is more things we can think of when we reason from that perspective, and not only doing efficiency measures on the, let's say, invisible side, but also introduce that in the way that we use devices, even if it's automated.
Okay, thank you. Bas, I think last question before we really end. Bas Sala.
Yes, thank you very much for all the information and the new insight. It was really interesting for the research. I have a question about something you said, Alireza, and that had to do with the technical development, that it goes really fast, and also in combination with policy intervention. Can you say something about that? Is the technology going faster than policy could be made? Or can we make policy or help people make policy so that the technical developments are influenced? Is there something to say about that in the research that you did before or anywhere else?
Thank you very much for your question. Yeah, we can see some policy that impact on our decisions, like the cycle of the battery is already designed by the EU, should be around 1000. And so it can impact, but yeah, sometimes not about the video streaming, but we can see for other sectors like AI that technology development might go quite faster than policy making. I'm not sure this is exactly the question, answer your question or not.
No, there are two good examples, I think.
Yeah.
I would love to hear how we can influence AI by policy, but we only have 1 minute left, so maybe that's for another time. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bas, for the nice bridge, because this is actually what we need to do. There's a lot of work to do. So I think at the end of this webinar, I would like to thank all the presenters of today for all the knowledge shared, and everybody also who attended this webinar and listened, and thank you for all the positive feedback we received so far. We are not there. We want to work and collaborate with all of you to develop interventions and to see where we can start influencing this behavior and what needs to be done. So we have set a date, 9th of April, a workshop in the afternoon. We will invite all of you to start working with us. And actually there's already a little bit Matthijs and in the Mentimeter and what you shared with us. These are the directions we want to also discuss then during the workshop. So to see which target behavior, which target groups, which type of interventions, and how can we work with you on pilots and so we do that together with, it's already mentioned by Hans in the beginning, Platform Energie Bewustzijn, Jolanda van der Veen and Samira Ibrahim. They're also attending this webinar. Thank you very much. So we will all invite you to this webinar, and in the meantime,